Altogether, the U.S. government employs more than an estimated 1,200 people in Russia. The majority are hired by the State Department, charged with running the U.S. Embassy and consulates, processing visas, and handling other diplomatic tasks. But it also includes employees of dozens of governmental agencies and departments, such as the Defense Department, the Agricultural Department, NASA, and even the Library of Congress. Collectively, this vast enterprise is often referred to as U.S. Mission Russia or just Mission Russia. The blog Diplo Pundit broke down the numbers. In 2013, U.S. Mission Russia, Embassy and Consulates General employed 1,279 staff. This included 301 U.S. direct hire positions and 934 locally employed LE staff positions from 35 U.S. government agencies. The majority of U.S. Mission Russia employees are not Americans and won't be expelled. Of 1,200 Mission Russian employees in 2013, 333 were U.S. citizens and 867 were designated foreign national staff, most of them probably Russians. Using the 2013 numbers, if Mission Russia is forced to let go of 755 people, a majority of them would not be U.S. citizens and probably would not be expelled from the country. Many of them are Russians working in administrative services. Putin said he is seeking parity and wants Mission Russia to employ the same number of people as Russia does in the United States, 455 people. The deadline is September 1st for the drawdown.
Here's various items from around the country and the world. From Washington, Republican, Democratic, and even bipartisan plans for reshaping parts of the Obama healthcare law are proliferating in Congress, but they have an iffy prospect at best, and there are no signs Monday that GOP leaders have chosen a fresh pathway after last week's collapse of their struggle to repeal and rewrite the statute. Despite a weekend of tweets from President Donald Trump insisting that the Senate revisit the issue, Republican prospects for garnering 50 votes to push something through the chamber seem to worsen after Senator John McCain returned to Arizona for cancer treatments. If the question is, do I think we should stay on health care until we get it done? I think it's time to move on to something else, said Senator Roy Blunt, Republican of Missouri. United Nations, the United States and North Korea hold the primary responsibility for de-escalating tensions and negotiating peace on the Korean Peninsula, not China, Beijing's UN ambassador said Monday. Liu Jiwei said that if Washington and Pyongyang refuse to reduce tensions and hold new talks as called for in UN security resolutions, then no matter how capable China is, China's efforts will not yield practical results because it depends on the two principal parties. The Trump administration has accused China of failing to rein in North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs and warned of a possible economic reprisals on Beijing, which is responsible for 90% of trade with the Northeast Asia nation. Somalia, the U.S. military said Monday it carried out a drone strike in Somalia that killed a member of the Al-Shabaab extremist group, while Somalia's government said it believes the strike killed a high-level Al-Shabaab commander responsible for several deadly bombings in the capital. From Florida, Tropical Storm Emily weakened to a tropical depression Monday afternoon as it slogged eastward across the Florida peninsula, spreading drenching rains, causing power outages, and leaving two fishermen to be rescued from Tampa Bay. The National Hurricane Center said Emily made landfall late Monday on Florida's Gulf Coast south of Tampa Bay. President Donald Trump's Drug Commission has called on him to declare a national emergency to deal with the country's opioid drug epidemic. The commission sent an initial report to the Republican president on Monday saying the approximately 142 deaths each day from drug overdoses mean the death toll is equal to September 11th every 3 weeks. The political defiance that made Joe Arpaio popular as Metro Phoenix's sheriff for 24 years, ultimately did him in Monday when he was found guilty of contempt of court for ignoring a judge's order to stop his traffic patrols that targeted immigrants. He is scheduled to be sentenced on October 5. And finally, billions of dollars spent on 2 new nuclear reactions in South Carolina went up in smoke Monday when the owners nixed plans to finish them after years of delays and cost overruns, dealing a severe blow to the industry's future. The reactors were to be among the first new nuclear reactors built in the U.S. in decades.
Thanks, Don. From Caracas, Venezuela, from the Associated Press, Venezuela's socialist government on Monday claimed a popular mandate to dramatically recast the country's political system, even as condemnations of the process poured in from governments around the world and the opposition at home. The United States added President Nicolas Maduro to a steadily growing list of high-ranking Venezuelan officials targeted by financial sanctions, escalating a tactic that so far has failed to alter the Venezuelan government's behavior. The Trump administration backed away from earlier threats to sanction Venezuela's oil industry, a move that could undermine Maduro's government, but raise U.S. gas prices and deepen Venezuela's humanitarian crisis. The sanctions freeze any assets Maduro may have in U.S. jurisdictions. Electoral authorities said more than 8 million people voted Sunday to create a constitutional assembly endowing Maduro's ruling party with virtually unlimited powers. The official result would mean the ruling party won more support than it had in any national election since 2013, despite a cratering economy, spiraling inflation, shortages of medicine, and malnutrition. And here's a world brief from the World Herald from Nairobi, Kenya. An official crucial to running Kenya's presidential election next week has been found, tortured, and killed, the Electoral Commission chairman said Monday. Chairman Wafula Chebukati helped identify the body of Christopher Musando at the city morgue. Musando had been in charge of managing information technology systems at the Electoral Commission. Kenya will be using biometric technology to identify voters and electronic transmission of voting results, which reduce the chances of fraud. The main opposition group has charged that President Uhuru Kenyatta wants to rig the elections.
Thanks, Deb. Well, there's been so much said and printed about the healthcare and what goes on. Here's the latest. Let's put it that way. It's from Washington, the Associated Press. And President Donald Trump says Congress should be paying what the public pays when it comes to Obamacare. But members of Congress already pretty much do. Here's a look at Trump's claim and the reality. Trump tweet Monday, if Obamacare is hurting people, and it is, why shouldn't it hurt the insurance companies, and why should Congress not be paying what public pays? That was the tweet. Now the facts. Although Trump's tweet may suggest otherwise, members of Congress and their staff get their health insurance through the Obamacare exchanges. They're required to do so by a provision in the health law itself. It's something of an anomaly because other people covered by employer-sponsored health insurance plans were not required by the law to enter the newly created insurance exchanges. But the provision was added under political pressure to avoid the perception that lawmakers were writing a law for the public that they themselves would be able to avoid. The 2010 law set up health insurance for members of Congress and their staffs through the District of Columbia Health Care Exchange. Most were kicked out of the federal employees' health benefits programs, which other government workers use. The federal government pays about 72% of lawmakers' premiums, according to the Congressional Research Service. Although employer contributions vary, 72% is in line with what other businesses offer their employees, said John Arzenmeyer, head of the small business majority. Not all members of Congress are on the DC exchange. Just like other people, some are covered through their spouse's insurance or through various other means. Senator John McCain gets his coverage from the Department of Veterans Affairs as a former Navy pilot, although he is being treated for his recent brain cancer diagnosis at the Mayo Clinic. Senator Claire McCaskill chooses to forego the employer contribution and buys her insurance, like other Missourians, from the National Obamacare Exchange. Although Trump's tweet could be read to suggest he plans to do something about what members of Congress pay for their health insurance, it's not clear what that could be. This much is known. He is upset that Republicans could not pass legislation dismantling Obamacare and is holding out the prospect of punishing lawmakers for their failure. Meantime, his negativity about insurance companies raises a different matter entirely. Although it's not completely clear what Trump is talking about by suggesting Obamacare should hurt the insurance companies, it could be a reference to an ongoing issue of whether the Trump administration will continue cost-sharing payments to insurers. White House advisor Kellyanne Conway said on Fox News Sunday that Trump will make a decision on that this week. The subsidies, totaling about $7 billion a year, help reduce deductibles and co-payments for consumers with modest incomes. President Barack Obama's administration used its rule-making authority to set direct payments to insurers to help offset these costs. Trump inherited the payment structure, but he also has the power to end it. The payments are the subject of a lawsuit brought by House Republicans over whether the health law specifically included a congressional appropriation for the money as required under the Constitution. Trump only guaranteed the payments through July.
Thanks, Don. Here's a story from the Associated Press in Minneapolis. 10 years ago today, a freeway bridge collapsed into the Mississippi River in Minneapolis during the evening rush hour. Many leaders saw the disaster, which killed 13 people and injured 145, as a wake-up call about the country's deteriorating infrastructure. The Interstate 35W bridge was one of the busiest in Minnesota before it fell August 1st, 2007. First responders scrambled to rescue survivors from the debris, including a school bus carrying 52 students and several adults. A fast-tracked replacement opened less than 14 months later. The state and two contractors ultimately paid out more than $100 million to survivors and families of the dead. While the collapse drew attention to the condition of America's aging infrastructure, federal investigators later said poor maintenance wasn't the chief cause. They ruled it was a design defect in the bridge, which was built in the 1960s. The National Transportation Safety Board said that crucial gusset plates that held the bridge's beams together were only half as thick as they should have been. A contributing factor was the nearly 300 tons of construction materials stockpiled on the deck for renovations. The American Society of Civil Engineers says the number of structurally deficient bridges nationwide, meaning they need to be repaired or replaced, declined from 12% in 2007 to 9% today. Yet the group estimates it would take $123 billion to address the nation's backlog of bridge rehabilitation needs. The improvements happened because states stepped up, said Andy Herman, a former president of the society and one of its experts on bridges. The collapse gave added impetus to a nationwide trend of design improvements, he said. Most bridges built in the 1950s and 60s were designed to last around 50 years. Newer bridges are typically designed to last 75 to 100 years, Herman said. Engineers are also choosing improved materials, he said, such as better steel and concrete. The collapse also turned a new focus on inspection. Bridges typically are inspected every 2 years, but Congress has mandated a more data-driven approach that will mean more frequent inspections for some and longer intervals for others to focus resources on the biggest risks. That plan is still being set up. It's unclear whether anything will come from President Donald Trump's proposal for a $1 trillion overhaul of the country's roads and bridges. He has yet to flesh out the details, and it hasn't gained much traction in Congress. His budget proposal calls for $200 billion in tax breaks over 9 years that theoretically would leverage $1 trillion worth of construction.
Thanks, Deb. 20 minutes after the hour, time to move on to local and legislative news. Well, more than 1,000 Lincolnites showed up at 2 town hall meetings hosted Monday by Representative Jeff Fortenberry, and what the congressman heard was fear and anger. Fear that Republican legislative proposals to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act would result in personal loss of health care coverage through Obamacare and Medicaid. Anger that they may be unable to afford health care or insurance coverage or be priced out of the market. Fortenberry said he's focused on seeking innovative solutions that reduce health care costs and deliver quality care while recognizing that this is not just a federal solution. One way to go would be to move toward health savings accounts, he suggested. It's a broken system, the Republican congressman told about 300 people at Shoe Middle School, the first stop on a cross-town tour that ended with an appearance before a boisterous crowd at Lux Middle School that was estimated at more than 800 people. It's a broken system, Fortenberry said. Both Democrats and Republicans own this together. Legislators are too dug in on both sides, he said. Fortenberry told one questionnaire who suggested that the issue requires bipartisan cooperation that he was absolutely correct. Asked whether he represents his party or his party leadership rather than his Nebraska constituents on big issues such as health care policy, Fortenberry said, I analyze the issue, I try to get input, I make a judgment. I'm there by myself at decision time. Fortenberry fielded personal pleas from people who said they fear they would lose their current Medicaid or ACA coverage without any ability to afford private health insurance under the Republican plan approved by the House and a separate Senate proposal that was scuttled by a single vote. The debate is about financing health care and delivering health care, Fortenberry said, suggesting that innovation could lead to better results while saving money. Fortenberry assured the crowd at Shoe Middle School that going back to the way it was before Obamacare reformed the system is not part of the dynamic in Washington. ACA has helped some people and hurt others, the 1st District Congressman said. We need to do better. We need to try to reform the individual market. While the late afternoon crowd at Shoe was generally polite with only scattered interruptions, the larger evening crowd at Lux was more confrontational. Most participants applauded a reference to a single-payer healthcare system, and when Fortenberry referred to healthcare in other countries, that reference triggered applause and some cheers. When Fortenberry defended his pro-life position in opposition to funding Planned Parenthood, dozens of people stood up and walked out of the meeting in unison. There was a large police presence at Lux and about 6 officers on duty at Shoe earlier in the day. Only a few other issues were raised by town hall participants, including trade and the environment.
Thanks, Don. From the World Herald, Westside Community Schools voters will be asked once again to approve a tax levy override of up to 15 cents to generate more revenue for the school district. The district plans a mail-in election with ballots due September 12th. The Westside Board voted 5-0 Monday night to place the issue on the ballot. Voting to do so were board members Chris Carnes, Doug Krenzer, Beth Morissette, David Williams, and Adam Yale. Board member Dana Blakely was absent. The Millard School Board also has been discussing a levy override that would go into effect in the 2018-19 school year, but it has not yet acted on the issue. The school board is set to discuss a potential override at meetings in August and September. Westside board members said the decision wasn't made lightly. The district has grappled with budget troubles over the last several years, resulting in roughly $10.5 million worth of cuts that have eliminated staff positions, elementary world language classes, and summer camps. We want to have a balanced budget moving forward, but we don't want to have to reduce any of our outstanding programs, Superintendent Blaine McCann said. The ability to raise additional tax dollars will help offset property tax collections and state aid that have not kept pace with district expenses, officials said. We certainly would wish it would be otherwise in terms of our revenue picture, but the fact is revenues have not been strong, Krenzer said. Our community has consistently and historically supported these asks, and they do that, I think, because they recognize we do exceptional things for our students. Since 1998, Westside voters have approved a series of levy overrides that allowed the district to exceed the state's $1.05 general fund property tax levy limit. Under state law, districts can ask voters for permission to raise that lid. The last time Westside held a levy override election was 2012, when voters approved a 10-cent override that runs through the 2017-18 school year. With that override set to expire, the district is recommending raising the override up to 15 cents for a 5-year period that would begin in the 2018-19 school year. The district's current general fund budget is $71.1 million, with a levy of about $1.32 per $100 valuation. For the owner of a home assessed at $150,000, that translates to a school tax bill of $1,980. If the district were to add 5 cents, that bill would increase by $75. District-wide, that extra 5 cents could bring in an additional $1.75 million each year, officials said. Just because we're asking for 15 cents doesn't mean we're going to levy it in full, Williams said. We're going to keep being good stewards of taxpayer money. But the ability to spend some or all of that 15-cent levy would provide the district with much-needed flexibility, Williams said, especially as state aid figures have fluctuated. The additional money would contribute to district operations, including competitive pay for teachers, expanded mental health support for students, career education opportunities, and protecting academic programs from further budget cuts. Morissette, the board president, said Wednesday voters have traditionally valued district offerings such as small class size and a one-to-one technology initiative. Doug Kagan with the group Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom said he wasn't up to speed with all the details on the Westside request, but said his organization typically opposes levy overrides. The school board is expected to approve its 2017-18 budget in September. Karn said the board understands that some taxpayers are still reeling from higher than expected property valuations. We are not tone deaf about what's been going on in Douglas County with regard to property taxes, she said. Unfortunately, that really didn't move the ball for us in terms of revenue. Levy overrides are relatively rare in Nebraska. This year, 4 of Nebraska's 245 school districts have levy overrides in place: Westside, Exeter Milligan, Spalding, and Arcadia, according to the Nebraska Department of Education.
Well, thanks, Deb. Lincoln police have arrested 2 teenagers suspected of stealing 4 firearms, including a Nebraska State Trooper's patrol rifle from the cruiser parked in his driveway, a spokeswoman said Monday. The arrest came after investigators followed up on a report that a stolen Michael Kors purse was listed for sale online, Officer Angela Sands said. The woman contacted police about the post, and officers arranged to meet with the sellers on Sunday, Sands said. The sellers, teenage boys ages 15 and 17, were taken into custody, and officers searched their car and found 2 stolen handguns, she said. Investigators then got a search warrant for one of the boys' homes and recovered 2 long guns that had been stolen. One was determined to be a patrol rifle stolen from a Nebraska State Patrol cruiser July 16th at a southwest Lincoln home, according to police. In addition to the rifle, thieves stole a personal handgun from inside the trooper's garage, police said. Investigators Sunday recovered that handgun as well as the trooper's handcuffs and hat, Sands said. Police believe the suspects had tried to scrape off the serial numbers on at least 3 of the firearms. The boys were taken to the Lancaster County Youth Detention Center on suspicion of multiple felony charges, including possession of a stolen firearm, possession of a defaced firearm, theft by unlawful taking, and burglary. Their cases have been referred to the Lancaster County Attorney's Office. Police are investigating to see whether the boys are connected to 3 more firearm thefts. Those guns have not yet been recovered, Sands said. A total of 25 firearms were stolen in the city and county in July. Yep.
Thanks, Doc. From Lincoln, the beer stores in White Clay, Nebraska should not have been closed because they enjoy a renewal privilege for their state liquor licenses, an attorney for the businesses argued Monday. Scottsbluff lawyer Andrew Snyder, who represents the 4 beer-only liquor stores, asked the High Court to overturn the State Liquor Commission's April decision to not renew the liquor licenses for the stores. In written arguments submitted Monday, Snyder accused the Commission of blatant disregard of state laws in its decision. Those laws, he said, distinguish between an initial application for a liquor license and the renewal of a license, which the beer stores attempted this year. One thing is plainly clear from a review of the proceedings. The Commission far exceeded its authority in its zeal to terminate the existing licenses, Snyder wrote in a 30-page filing. Absent some change of circumstance in the location or operation of a liquor outlet, Snyder said that the Supreme Court has ruled in the past that stores enjoy the privilege of having their license automatically renewed. The Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, citing concern about the lack of law enforcement in White Clay, ordered the 4 stores to undergo a rigorous process to reapply for their liquor licenses. The attorney for the beer stores argued that the adequacy of law enforcement can only be considered when issuing a new liquor license. Even if it could be considered during a renewal, Snyder said, there was no evidence that law enforcement had declined in White Clay. The Liquor Board ultimately voted against renewing the licenses. State attorneys have argued that the Commission has the right to shut down a liquor outlet at any time to protect the public. The Supreme Court is taking written arguments ahead of hearing oral arguments in late August over whether the beer stores should remain closed. The beer stores have generated nationwide publicity and criticism because the tiny town sold the equivalent of 3.5 million cans of beer a year, almost all to the residents of the adjacent Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Alcohol is officially banned on the reservation, though alcohol-related problems are widespread. Recent statistics on beer sales in the vicinity of White Clay show that sales have been reduced since the beer stores closed. But those statistics do not take into account beer sales in South Dakota or the sale of hard alcohol and wine in Nebraska near White Clay.
Nearly all of the Nebraska prisoners serving life without parole for crimes they committed as juveniles got new sentences in response to a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, but for some it made little difference. Nebraska lawmakers overhauled the state's sentencing laws in 2013 in response to the High Court's ruling the previous year that banned mandatory life sentences for crimes committed at age 17 or younger. Last year, the court said the ruling was retroactive for the more than 2,000 offenders serving such sentences nationwide, and that all but the rare juvenile offender whose crimes reflects permanent incorrigibility should have a chance at parole one day. The court found that the harshest punishments levied at and against adult criminal offenders are unconstitutionally cruel and unusual when imposed on juveniles because of their lack of development and potential for change. The Associated Press surveyed all 50 states to see how judges and prosecutors, lawmakers, and parole boards are responding to the Supreme Court's mandate. Here is a guide to the situation in Nebraska. State's response. Well, Nebraska's 2013 law eliminated mandatory life without parole for juveniles and set a new sentencing range of 40 years to life for those who commit first-degree murder or kidnapping. The law requires judges to consider mitigating factors before sentencing, including the offender's age, ability to appreciate risks and consequences, intellectual capacity, and mental health. It also requires the state parole board to review these inmates' cases once a year after they begin serving their sentences and consider similar mitigating factors. Now, where things stand. Nebraska has 22 inmates still in prison who had been sentenced to life for crimes committed as juveniles, said Jeffrey Pickens, Chief Legal Counsel for the Nebraska Commission on Public Advocacy. Of those have been resentenced. Pickens said one of the three was declared incompetent to stand for a new sentencing hearing. Clear why the other two have not been resentenced. Finally, sentences received. Nebraska's updated law still gives judges the chance to impose life without parole, but none of the affected inmates has received that sentence, Pickens said. However, he said, some were given such long prison terms that they're effectively life sentences.
Thanks, Don. In a related story from Lincoln, a Nebraska prison inmate punched and kicked a staff member Monday at the Tecumseh State Prison. The Nebraska Department of Correctional Services reported that the assault occurred in the dining hall. The inmate punched the employee several times in the face until the employee fell, at which point the inmate kicked the employee in the face. When other staff arrived to intervene, the inmate ran from the area. He was quickly restrained and placed in restrictive housing. The staff member received medical treatment for serious injuries that were not life-threatening. Corrections Director Scott Frakes said the incident will be investigated by the Nebraska State Patrol. The patrol will turn over any findings to the county attorney for possible prosecution. Corrections, meanwhile, will deal with the assault through its disciplinary process. NDCS staff members are brave, dedicated professionals who knowingly put themselves in harm's way, Frakes said. Prison is a dangerous place, but violence to our staff members will not be tolerated. In an attempt to control the threat, the department has put one gallery of a housing unit on modified lockdown, which involves restrictions on inmate movement. The Monday incident marks the fifth assault of prison staff within the past 10 days that resulted in serious injury. There have been at least 11 prison staff assaults with serious injury in the past 2 months, according to department reports. Spokeswoman Dawn Renee Smith said the department issues a press release only if an assault produces serious injuries, meaning that medical treatment is required. She also clarified that incidents in which employees are injured in the course of trying to forcibly control inmates are not classified as assaults.
Well, a 34-year-old woman who posted an online advertisement seeking money for sex with a Lincoln teenager got prison time for it Monday. Jacqueline Stebbins pleaded guilty to a single count of pandering of a minor. 2 other counts were dropped. Defense attorney Joy Schiffermiller said Stebbins, too, was the victim of this kind of crime when she was about the same age, 17, as the oldest of the 3 victims in this case. She said Stebbins believed others were taking advantage of the girl by taking her money, so she tried to help her by putting up the ad. Now, Stebbins regrets it, Schiffermiller said. When a plainclothesman officer answered the online ad for an escort and showed up June 14, 2016, at Kayla Holt's apartment near 16th and Garfield Streets, Kimberly Wheeler answered the door, collected money, and showed him to a 17-year-old runaway, prosecutors said. In a warrant for Stebbins' arrest, police said the website ad for escort services for the teen traced back to Stebbins' cell phone and email address. She and Wheeler both were accused of being involved in the plot to get money from men for sex with teenage girls, an arrest warrant says. The 17-year-old told investigators that she had sex for money with about 3 people a day for about a month before the police answered the ad. In court Monday, Deputy Lancaster County Attorney Chris Turner said when this sex trafficking case started, he was naive to the fact that this kind of thing happened in Lincoln. But he said adults are taking advantage of young girls, in this case, a 14, 16, and 17-year-old with various troubles at home. They were vulnerable to be preyed on, Turner said. And that's what Ms. Stebbins did, and she did it for her own profit. Lancaster County District Judge Darla Ideas said it's clear to her that Stebbins sought out vulnerable children and recruited them knowing what they were going to go through. When she sentenced her to 10 to 15 years in prison. Wheeler got 18 months in prison for aiding and abetting the solicitation of prostitution. Holt received 7 years in prison for keeping a place of prostitution involving a minor, child abuse, and contributing to the delinquency of a child. Both had pleaded guilty.
Thanks, Don. From Lincoln, how big could Nebraska's solar eclipse viewing party get? Potentially on par with the crowds for a Husker football game, the College World Series, and the annual Berkshire Hathaway meeting combined, Governor Pete Ricketts said Monday that the August 21st eclipse could be one of the biggest events in state history. To deal with the influx of visitors, possibly almost 500,000, state officials plan to put extra state troopers on the road and increase staffing at state parks along the eclipse's path. We want people to think about being patient, Ricketts said, safety first. On Monday, the governor said numerous state agencies gathered at the state capitol to announce their preparedness plans and share tips to ensure that the event goes smoothly. Among them, the Nebraska State Patrol has applied for a $10,000 grant to help cover about 160 hours for additional dispatchers and troopers statewide. The patrol also will launch 3 aircraft to keep an eye on traffic. The Department of Transportation will postpone road maintenance to prevent backups. Drivers are asked to not stop or park on the shoulder during the event. Oversized and slow-moving traffic won't be allowed on the road. The department is encouraging drivers to turn their headlights on and watch for pedestrians during the event. Do not take photos of the eclipse while driving, and do not wear eclipse eyewear while driving. The department's 511 app will have the latest information about traffic conditions. John Ricks, executive director of the Nebraska Tourism Commission, noted that events planned in communities during the eclipse will, they hope, keep drivers off the road. State park employees outside the eclipse route will help at the 34 state parks along the route. The Game and Parks Commission has printed 20,000 eclipse glasses to hand out. Campsites along the path have been booked, though some first-come, first-served sites are still available. The commission is urging visitors to print their park stickers in advance and take special care when using boat ramps, which are expected to be busy with people who want to view the eclipse from the water. The Nebraska Emergency Management Agency is encouraging people to have a full tank of gas, their eclipse eyewear, and other items such as sunscreen on hand. The agency's chief concern is fires due to dry conditions. The Nebraska National Guard has been put on standby should it be needed on the day of the eclipse. The National Guard Joint Operations Center will operate and work with emergency management officials. At least one other state, Oregon, has announced plans to deploy the National Guard to deal with tourists coming to that state for the eclipse. In Nebraska, the total eclipse will begin southwest of Agate Fossil Beds National Monument at 11:46 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time and pass out of the state 21 minutes later south of Fall City at 1:07 p.m. Central Daylight Time. The partial and full phases of the eclipse will take about 3 hours to complete, though the moon will totally block out the sun for only a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Deb. Well, before we get on to this week's death notices and funeral arrangements, there will be a grand jury will investigate the death of a 45-year-old Fremont man who died at a hospital Saturday after declining medical treatment. Robert S. Imus was arrested on drug possession charges by Dodge County authorities July 26 and taken to the Fremont jail. There he refused to eat or take insulin for his diabetes, the sheriff added. Imus was still uncooperative when he was booked into the Wahoo jail July 27th. The Wahoo jail holds inmates for Dodge County if they are detained longer than 24 hours. Jail staff checked its records and determined Imus was diabetic, had him evaluated by a medical provider, and ultimately got Imus to eat and receive treatment. On Saturday, Imus told staff he wasn't feeling well. Staff began life-saving efforts soon after they found him unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at 5:48 p.m. Well, here are today's notices from the Lincoln Journal-Star, and the first is for Clark, Stephen G. Clark, age 54, of Johnson. Memorials in lieu of flowers, J-B Schools Foundation, Nemaha County Friends of 4-H. Details from the Hemmingson Funeral Home in Auburn. Obasi, Nawojo Anahoy Obasi, age 76, Roper and Sons Funeral Home will be able to, in Lincoln, Roper's and Sons Funeral Home in Lincoln will be able to provide you with any details. And DeCamp, John William DeCamp, is a veteran of the U.S. Army, served as a state senator for four years. Memorials to the Norfolk Funeral Home. Details regarding memorial services will be provided at a later date. No funeral home has been provided. Clark, Jeannie Clark, age 76, Heafy and Heafy Funeral Home, handling the arrangements. Memorials to the church, which is or Sunshine Preschool, or the grandchildren. Wait a second here. Okay. Heafy and Heafy Funeral Home. Let's see, we have Bidding, Deborah D. Bidding, age 72. Lincoln Aspirin Care, taking care of the arrangements. Busier, Pauline D. Busier, age 86. Roper and Sons, handling the arrangements. Memorials to the Bethany Animal Clinic. Rothman, Leon H. Rothman, age 90, Omaha. Memorials to Burnett Society, University of Nebraska Foundation, in Lincoln, the University of Nebraska Foundation in Lincoln. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries, handling the arrangements. Conway, James Ray Conway, age 69, of Las Vegas, Nevada. Jim grew up in Ogallala, Nebraska. And he obtained a degree in civil engineering from the University of Nebraska. In lieu of flowers, please send donations in Jim's memory to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. No funeral home has been provided. Cosper, Harold R. Cosper, age 95, of Lincoln. He was a World War II U.S. Army Air Corps veteran, served in France. Roper and Sons can provide you with details, which one is memorials to the Capital Humane Society. Ireland, Paul W. Ireland, E-I-L-A-N-D, age 75. Memorial contributions in lieu of flowers can be made to the family for future designation. No funeral home has been provided. Now we have Ireland, Vic F. Ireland III, age 59, Marion, Indiana. He was born, in Indiana. I don't know what his relationship here in Nebraska. Well, he was, Vic was very involved with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind. It was grateful for opportunities they afforded him and the many friendships he made. Needham Story Wamper Funeral Service, North Chapel in Marion, Indiana, handling the arrangements. In lieu of flowers, donations can be made in Victor's name to the Nebraska Commission for the Blind. Keith, Timothy R. Keith, age 56, Lincoln. No other information available at this time. MacArthur, William E. Bill MacArthur, age 59, Lincoln. Colonial Chapel Funeral Home, handling the arrangements. Memorials may be directed to his children. McGinnis, Janice Ruth Jan McGinnis, age 70, of Plymouth. Let's see. Memorials, PEO Home in Beatrice or Southeast Nebraska Cancer Center. Griffiths Hovendick Chapel in Beatrice, handling the arrangements. McKee, Joseph Earl McKee, age 85, of Lincoln. Joe served in the Army during the Korean War. Trump Funeral Services, handling the arrangements in Lincoln. Monroe, Marlene Joanne Monroe. No age is provided for Joanne. Passed away July 7th of this year in Lincoln. Celebration of life to be held 1 p.m. on August 10 at Cotner Center Condos in Lincoln. No other information available. Spencer, Captain Harry Arthur Spencer Jr., USN, that's U.S. Navy, I believe, retired, age 87, of Willow Street, Pennsylvania. He was born in Lincoln, 1929. He was a submariner or a submariner, however you wish to pronounce it. Quite an extensive biography here. Harry will be interred at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors at a later date. In lieu of flowers, memorial contributions may be made to the United States Naval Academy. Vergith, Irene Elaine Vergith, Vergith, age 75, passed away in Henderson, Nevada, born in Lincoln. Memorials in care of the American Cancer Society. Celebration of life, Friday, August 4 at Martell United Methodist Church. Waltke, Janice L. Waltke, age 78, of Lincoln. Memorials may be directed to the Sheridan Lutheran Church Foundation. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home can provide you with the details. And that was the last notice in today's Journal Star, Deb.
Thank you. Now turning to the obituaries and funeral arrangements in the Omaha World Herald. Ackles, Virginia M. Ginger Ackles, 74 years old. The family will receive friends Thursday, August 3rd, from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Bel Air Chapel of Heaphy Hoffman Dora Cutler. Memorials are suggested to the UNMC Buffett Cancer Center. Baumert, Evelyn A. Baumert, 90. Heaphy Hoffman Dora Cutler will have a further notice later. Arrangements are pending. Breesy, Joseph Breesy, 70. Mr. Breesy was a veteran. The celebration of life will be 6 p.m. Wednesday, August 2nd at Roeder Mortuary on 108th Street in Omaha. Brusek, Richard C. Brusek, 88. Mr. Brusek was a veteran. He served in the Air Force. The burial will be Mass of Christian burial will be Thursday, 10 a.m. at St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church. Memorials are asked to the family for charities of their choice. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz is handling the arrangements. Chisiak, Bernice M. Chisiak, no, that's an L, Cheslak, Bernice M. Cheslak, 91. The Mass of Christian burial will be Friday, August 4th at 10 a.m. at Christ the King Catholic Church on South 86th Street. Memorials are suggested to the Christ the King Educational Fund. Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler, the Bel Air Chapel, is in charge of arrangements. Sitta, Marjorie Ann Sitta of Sutherland, 88. Mass of Christian burial will be 11 a.m. Tuesday, August 1st, that's today, at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. Adams and Swanson Funeral Home in North Platte are handling the arrangements. Clark, Jean M. Clark, 76. Services will be Friday, August 4th at 10 a.m. at Harvey Oaks Baptist Church. Memorials are asked to Harvey Oaks Baptist Church, Sunshine Christian Preschool, or to Jean's grandchildren. Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler, the Bel Air Chapel, is in charge of arrangements. Cummings, Genevieve S. Cummings, 91. The funeral service will be Thursday, August 3rd at 10 a.m. at St. Paul United Methodist Church on Corby Street. Brayman Mortuary is handling the arrangements. Davies, Paul Davies, aged 57, of Omaha. There will be a small gathering with family and friends Wednesday, August 2nd from 6 to 9 in the Fremont City Auditorium, 925 North Broad Street in Fremont. DeCamp, John William DeCamp, 76. Mr. DeCamp was a veteran of the United States Army. He served in Vietnam. He was also a Nebraska state senator for 4 terms. Details regarding memorial services will be provided at a later date. Memorials can be directed to the Norfolk Veterans Home. DePerkins, Terry E. DePerkins, 55. There will be no services. Arrangements are handled by the Good Shepherd Funeral Home. Doyle, Elizabeth A. Doyle of Council Bluffs, 94 years old. The Mass of Christian burial will be Friday at 2 p.m. at St. Peter's Catholic Church, which is at 1 Bluff Street in Council Bluffs. Memorials are suggested to the St. Patrick Church Building Fund. Cutler O'Neill Meyer Woodring is in charge of arrangements. Elmore, Mary S. Elmore, 85. The celebration of Mary's life will be Thursday, August 3rd at 11 a.m. at the Brayman Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Fuccio, Sebastiano Fuccio, 97. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home is handling arrangements, and there is no notice about a service. Gurmis, Johnny Dale Gurmis, 66, of Cedar Creek, Nebraska. The funeral service will be Saturday, August the 5th, 2017 at 2 p.m. at Ithaca United Methodist Church in Ithaca, Nebraska. Memorials are asked to the family. Geyer, G-U-Y-E-R, James E. Geyer, 68. A complete notice will follow from Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler. Haney, Roger D. Haney, 85 years old. He was a veteran. Mass of Christian burial will be Wednesday the 2nd at 10 a.m. at St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church on Pacific Street with military honors by the Millard American Legion Post 374 and the VFW Post 8334. Heafy Hoffman Dwark Cutler. Rabick, Darlene M. Thurkeldson Rabick, 55. There will be a memorial service Thursday at 11 a.m. at the Roeder Mortuary. Kasmerick, Francis N. Buchel Kasmerick, 92. A more complete notice will follow, but services will be Saturday the 5th at 10 a.m. at Christ the King Catholic Church. Memorials to Masses at Christ the King Catholic Church or Masses at Sacred Heart Catholic Church of Lincoln or the Sienna Francis House or Marion High School. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries are in charge of arrangements. Kiefer, Diane E. Kiefer, 67, of Waterloo. Private services have been held and arrangements were managed by the Reichmuth Funeral Home. Lucht, L-U-C-H-T, Thomas E. Lucht, 77. Funeral service will be 10 a.m. Friday the 4th with Masonic services at 7 p.m. on the day before. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the Parkinson Association. Forest Lawn Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Masters, Louis J. Masters Jr., 76. The Mass of Christian Burial will be Friday the 4th at 10 a.m. at St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church. Memorials are directed to the family, Heafy, Hoffman, Dora, Cutler. McGrath, Rita Ann McGrath, 93. Funeral Mass will be Friday at 10 a.m. at St. Mary's Catholic Church. A more complete notice will follow from Corisco, Larkin, Staskowitz. Novak, Jane S. Novak, 86. The Mass of Christian Burial will be Saturday the 5th at 10:30 a.m. at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Bellevue. Memorials to the ALS Association Mid-America Chapter. Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Heafy Hoffman is handling the arrangements. Rotman, Leon H. Rotman, 90. Service will be Thursday at 10 a.m. at Pacific Hills Lutheran Church. Pardon me, John A. Gentleman is in charge. Seidler, Beatrice E. Seidler, age 92. The burial will be in St. Joseph Cemetery in Council Bluffs, Iowa on Friday the 5th of August. Pardon me. Sepanowski, Ronald L. Sepanowski, 64. Funeral will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. at St. Thomas More Catholic Church. Memorials to the family for the charity of their choice, Heafy, Hoffman, Dora, Cutler. Tattleman, May Gradinsky, otherwise known as Billy Tattleman, maybe Tatelman, T-A-T-E-L-M-A-N. Services will be held Thursday the 3rd at 10 a.m. at the Schrager Memorial Chapel at Temple, Israel. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to Nebraska Humane Society, Heafy, Hoffman, Dora, Cutler. And finally, Wagner, Celinda A. Wagner, 71. Visitation begins Tuesday at 5:30 with a vigil service at 7 at the mortuary, but it will be private. Corisco, Larkin, Staskowitz Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. And those are the obituaries in today's World Herald.
Thanks, Deb. Well, it's 1 minute after the top of the hour and time for us to take our normal break. It's also time for us to remind everyone that listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
And thank you very much, Don.
Well, your cough and cold's doing really well. I mean, you're really...
A few coughs there where we didn't want them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Second hour after we take our break. And the first thing we'd like to do now is to play for you the home delivery meal menus for today. Here with the senior home delivery meal menus is Ann Pelican. Welcome, Ann.
Tuesday, August the 1st, barbecue pork rib
You want any
patty,
coffee or water?
Oh, I got some, thanks.
barbecue baked
Water.
beans, corn,
You know, I have
cake, and a pint of white
where's it at? Where'd it go?
And we thank
We'll
you
get a
very
cough
much,
drop.
Ann
I'll be right
Pelican, for reading the senior home delivery meal menus for today. This menu will be repeated about 1 p.m. just after Nebraska Life Hour and just prior to Ann Boyce reading from the bookshelf today. It will be played along with tomorrow's menu for your better meal planning. And now, we did not have the birthdays earlier today for our morning break. We do have them now.
You have?
Well, I have the doctors.
Yeah.
And if you want to do, what's her name?
You know, I don't mind doing Amy, but I have,
You had one on the front page, I
Well,
think,
here it is.
about the cancer guy.
August
Yeah.
1st. Happy birthday wishes. are
But I also
going right
have one
out
about
to
the tax
Chandler.
holiday.
Rose
It's in
Graham.
business, but I could use it.
Mary Kelly.
oh yeah, you could use it in business. And I
Or
have,
use it for the other thing. If you have something.
I have some other stuff about local things that are happening in Omaha that people could go to, just a whole column of them somewhere.
Does a great job.
Um,
Joanne
Here they
Ferguson
are.
has another lady having a birthday, and Arnie Jacobson. All of you
Okay.
have a wonderful day.
so I
It
don't
sounds like
necessarily need
You
Amy.
don't need Amy.
And I have
it's a
Sam
lovely day
Shepard.
today, and I hope you're all out enjoying it.
playwright, poet.
And also enjoying
All
your
right, I'll do
family and
Amy.
friends when you're
Okay, because
celebrating.
do you have
your
other
birthday.
things?
And those
Much
are
other? You have the tax
No,
holiday.
I got the tax holiday.
That's good.
I can do that for
These
business.
wishes
Or-
go
Yeah.
to each and every
Yeah.
one of you from
We
each
got
and
it, we
every
got
one of us
Yeah, yeah.
here at the Radio Talking Book Service.
I gotta find mine.
Is that Iowa tax holiday? We don't have one in Nebraska, do we?
No, it's Iowa and Missouri.
And
There's
we
one in
thank you
in
very,
Tennessee.
very
My
much
kids
again.
took
Again, that
advantage.
was the wonderful and very special voice of
We're a
Civil
Republican state. We like
coordinator
to get the
for
middle
many
class
years,
as much as we
a lot
can.
longer than I've been
We
here.
don't,
at the
we don't want
Radio
to hurt the
Talking
business,
Book
you know.
I know.
And Sybil is
That's true.
I know.
celebrating, actually, her birthday was last Saturday, the 29th
You
of
know, everybody
July.
complains about
Now, we're
taxes in this state.
celebrating today, and we
How
have
come
cakes and
it's all
some
Republican state?
refreshments
What
and
the hell's
some
wrong
goodies.
with you?
We wish
we're
you a
no,
very,
you know,
very happy, wonderful
quit
birthday,
complaining. You
Sybil
vote for the same
Mayhem.
jacks.
And the Radio Talking Book Network is what you're listening
Another
to
problem,
right
our
now.
prison system has
for the
got to be
Radio
the
Talking
scariest
Book
one.
Network in Nebraska.
Jeez, I'd hate to.
And now it is time to
Yeah.
head back to Studio A
Okay.
and
Studio
introduce
A.
again our fine readers for today. Let's welcome back Don Van and Deb 80.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, listeners, for sticking with us. Well, it's time for editorials, which means we begin with letters to the editor. And from the Journal Star, there are two letters today. The first is from Ronald R. Wall of Lincoln. And Ronald writes, I am confused by Senator Ben Sasse's comments on the health care debate. He stated the Senate's failure to vote to repeal as a major disappointment to people who were promised full repeal. That's from July 27th. Sasse criticizes repeal's failure. I'm not sure who that is, but it certainly appears to be a minority of U.S. citizens. An April Gallup poll found 55% of the Americans surveyed approved of Obamacare. A June Wall Street Journal/NBC poll found Obamacare to be more popular at 41% than the House repeal and replace alternative at 16%. Only 12% liked the Senate version in a US Today/Suffolk University poll. So whom are we appealing to? It sounds like the minority of voters who voted for Trump, not the entire US population. And as Trump did not win the popular vote, it appears to be the minority to whom we want to appeal. Additionally, his popularity keeps dropping and is about 38%. So it seems the senator is appealing to a minority of U.S. citizens. That confuses me. There are issues with the ACA, and Democrats should not have passed it with no Republican support. However, it needs to be fixed, not repealed. That would force Republicans and Democrats to work together, which is a novel idea. I am suggesting the Senate and Congress be honest when throwing ideas around that are not supported by facts. That was Ronald R. Wall of Lincoln. And the second letter in today's Journal Star is from Sam Rapp of Lincoln. And Sam writes, instead of slowing traffic down on what is basically a small highway and creating what would probably just be a continual traffic hindrance, why not just build an overpass that children can walk over to cross 84th Street near Layton Avenue? There is a similar one on 84th Street down by the Walmart just south of Havelock Avenue. That one is actually a bike path, but the idea is the same, and it would address the concerns of parents whose children cross 84th Street to attend school. It would probably not cost the city as much as it would for whatever they have in mind, and it is enclosed. Just a thought. And that was Sam Rapp of Lincoln, Deb.
Thanks. There are several letters to the Public Pulse in the World Herald. First one is from Helen Deffenbacher of Omaha. She says, thank you for the excellent story in the July 30th World Herald. Oil industry has skeptics about need now for XL, By not building the Keystone XL pipeline, TransCanada would match its actions to its words in the corporation's 2013 Environmental and Renewable Energy Commitment Statement. The statement begins, "At TransCanada, environmental responsibility is about pursuing corporate practices to reduce land disturbance, carbon intensity, energy consumption, and water use." More than half of TransCanada's 6,200 megawatts of power generation capacity comes from low or non-emitting carbon sources, including solar and wind, natural gas, and nuclear. These projects, located in Canada and the United States, have created permanent jobs and tax revenues for local economies. Knowing what we know today about energy markets and about the increasing number of corporations such as TransCanada that are transitioning to more sustainable sources of energy and away from carbon-intensive sources such as tar sands oil, why would we build a pipeline we know is already looking obsolete before it's even put into the ground and under our rivers, lakes, and streams? Why would we choose to task some future generation with having to dig it up as it ages, corrodes, and leaks? A generation that surely will know we were well aware of its potential environmental and economic risks. That again is from Helen Deffenbacher of Omaha. From Patricia Sexton of Omaha, "Our poor police. Not only do they have to catch the bad guys and drug dealers, now we expect them to be mental health counselors and culturally sensitive to all races and creeds. Good grief, pretty soon they will all have to have PhDs to do their job. The public is putting a lot of pressure on these men and women to do the impossible. It took me 6 years to earn my mental health license, and I couldn't do the job of a policeman. Since Nebraska has been cutting money it spends on mental health, tell me, where do these police officers take the overwhelming number of mentally ill people walking the streets of Omaha?" That's from Patricia Sexton of Omaha. From Peg Watkins of Omaha, "Amazing. A savings of $6 million on OPS busing this year." She refers to successful test drive in the July 28th World Herald. "What one can do when the gravy train slows." Again, that's Peg Watkins of Omaha. From Jack Urban of Omaha, "I had to laugh at the July 31st Public Pulse letter, 'Sass should emulate McCain.' Both Ben Sass and John McCain ran for the Senate, pledging to repeal Obamacare to improve health care for Americans. If either was unhappy with the bill offered, why didn't they roll up their shirt sleeves and help with writing a better bill? With a resounding nay vote, the sound of the hypocrisy from McCain was deafening. This is the reason members of Congress need to have term limits." That's Jack Urban of Omaha. From Stanley Gocek, I think, Gocek of Blair, "President Donald Trump has agreed to end covert support of the Syrian rebels by the CIA in an effort to get along better with the Russians. Trump to end covert support of rebels in the July 20th World Herald," is the article to which he refers. "This is not going to end well. Syrian President Bashar Assad is a genocidal maniac. He has murdered hundreds of thousands of his own people, and the civil war that is trying to force him from power has forced more than 1.3 million people to flee the country. The only way a decent person would agree to not supporting the rebels is if Assad's ouster was part of the deal. I don't believe Trump even tried to get the job done." That's from Stanley Gocek of Blair. From Al Mum of Omaha, "Medicare and Medicaid are turning 52 years old this year. Both programs have been invaluable to improving and indeed in many cases saving the lives of seniors in America. But these programs are under heavy attack in Congress. The Republican health care proposals would damage Medicare and destroy Medicaid. The Trump budget also attacks the Social Security Disability Program. President Donald Trump is breaking his campaign promise that he would protect these programs. It's time to ask members of Nebraska's congressional delegation if they support cuts to these vital programs when there are bills and proposals out there that would strengthen and expand all of them." Again, that was from Al Mum of Omaha. Ronald J. Osborne of Omaha writes, of course, "Are you upset that the Environmental Protection Agency is rolling back regulations allowing corporations to pollute our environment? Are you bothered that the president wants to eliminate the Clean Water Act? If so, then I have one question. Are you walking the walk or just talking the talk? It's easy to call for regulations on others' activities, But what about your own? Do you buy organic produce or produce that has been sprayed with pesticides? Do you use poison chemicals on your yard? Do you use detergents, shampoos, and soaps made with artificial fragrances and other toxic ingredients? You are voting with your dollars. So if you purchase products from companies that create poisons and pollution, you are part of the problem. That was from Ronald J. Osborne of Omaha. And finally, in today's Public Pulse, this is from Ken Keith of Omaha. With the death of Warren K. Urbaum, U.S. District Judge who was an advocate for ethics in the July 31st World Herald, we have lost not only a distinguished judge, but also a paragon of decency, fairness, and humanity. In his extraordinary career as a jurist, his life as an exceptional citizen, and his role as a friend of education, Judge Urbaum was an exemplar of integrity, kindness, and what it means to be a gentleman.
Thanks, Deb. Well, the Journal Star has a few words that are very important to the state of Nebraska. Japan announced Friday that frozen beef imports from the United States were subject to an emergency 50% tariff because they had exceeded quotas set by the island nation. Few, if any, states could claim being more adversely affected by that announcement than Nebraska. Beef is obviously a major contributor to Nebraska's exports, chief of which are agricultural goods and manufactured products. It's often said that Nebraska's agricultural bounty feeds the world, but its farmers and ranchers need market access to carry out that mission. Accordingly, Nebraska needs trade agreements with Japan and other major buyers of products from this state's industries in place to reduce barriers to reach lucrative foreign markets. Now, many other factors, including beef from Australia, American exporters, largest competitor in Japan, and European Union nations, are in play. The result will likely be a decrease in sales of Nebraska beef to its largest overseas customer. Meanwhile, those other nations will benefit because they have a trade agreement in place with Japan that includes lower tariffs for participating countries' imports. Because of the rejection of the Trans-Pacific Partnership by President Donald Trump, a move that hurt the agricultural Midwest at a time when it could least afford such a move, American goods are at a competitive disadvantage in the most densely populated region on the planet. The numbers and impact of playing from behind on trade are significant, as illustrated by the new tariffs. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts said Friday the Japanese market for beef products yielded $316 million in 2016 alone, making up about 5% of the state's $7.2 billion beef industry, as reported by the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. The United States Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agricultural Service reports that $1.5 billion worth of American beef products were exported to Japan last year, meaning Nebraska beef composed roughly 21% of that market. As a result, Japanese buyers are expected to purchase more fresh beef than frozen to avoid the emergency tariffs. Until fresh beef imports reaches a new level, forecasts to be possibly later this year, that triggers the same 50% tariffs. It is said that a rising tide lifts all boats, and in few places is that more true than Nebraska. In 2016, Nebraska imported about $3.6 billion worth of goods and exported nearly $6.4 billion, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, a nearly $2.8 billion trade surplus just last year. Trade is the economic lifeblood for Nebraska, and overseas markets are an increasingly critical part of the future for so many of the state's industries. PACs that allow for market access continue to be vital for Nebraska. Yep.
Thanks. Here's the editorial from the Omaha World Herald today. Nebraska's economic output in the first quarter this year was 4% less than the same period a year ago. This was the worst first quarter figure of any U.S. state. The downturn, tied to the agricultural sector's challenges and painfully evident in many of the state's rural communities well before now, warrants practical, careful responses by Nebraska residents and leaders. It's no secret to farmers and ranchers that they need to manage their way through it. They've already been doing that. It's particularly regrettable that drought has begun creeping into parts of the state, adding to the ag sector's burdens. Households, businesses, and governments all need to be prepared for possible belt-tightening beyond what's already been done. With a statewide ballot measure on property tax relief possible for November 2018, Nebraskans need to consider carefully how to balance practical tax relief with adequate funding for schools and other needs. Discussions on the issue need to be deliberative, sober, and pragmatic. Taxpayers are right to demand that state and local governments be fiscally responsible. At the same time, Nebraska should be wary of imposing a clampdown on local government revenues so rigid that schools or community colleges can't be funded properly. The economic numbers certainly are sobering. Although Nebraska's biggest economic slowdown for this first quarter was in agriculture at negative 3.85%, the number of other sectors of the state's economy also saw declines, although they were far smaller than the level suffered by agriculture. Examples include retail trade, transportation, real estate, and finance. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Bureau of Business Research projects that net farm income in Nebraska will fall to $3.7 billion this year, down almost 16% from 2016. This would be the fourth straight year of declines in net farm income for the state, far below the record high of almost $7.5 billion in 2011. Here's hoping the UNL economists are correct in forecasting that the ag income decline should hit bottom this year with a projected increase in 2018. Nebraska isn't alone in facing this downturn. Many ag-reliant plains states, including Iowa, also saw first quarter economic declines. Although Nebraska's current economic challenges are considerable, the state's positives need to be recognized. Some examples: the fundamental strength of Nebraska's ag sector, capable management by many private sector businesses, civic vision shown by communities, responsible fiscal management by the state, ranked number 6 nationally on that score in a new report, impressive performance by many school districts, forward-looking strategies at institutions of higher learning. Nebraska is doing a lot of things right. The challenge at present is to move smartly and prudently as a state to weather the current downturn.
Thanks, Deb. Well, it's 22 minutes after the hour. Time to move on to today's living and entertainment sections of the paper. And that means from the Journal Star, Ask the Doctors. And the doctors are Elizabeth Coe and Eve Glazier. Well, dear doctor, I'm living with Crohn's disease. Even though I feel fine, my wife is certain that it has caused me to be vitamin B12 deficient. If you could explain the signs of a B12 deficiency, it may put her mind at ease and get me off the hot seat. Well, dear reader, when you have Crohn's disease, a portion of your digestive tract is chronically irritated or inflamed. Symptoms include pain or cramping in your abdomen, diarrhea, fever, and weight loss. The cause of Crohn's disease, one of a group of disorders known as inflammatory bowel disease, that's IBD, is not known at this time. However, changes in diet and the use of medications to reduce inflammation, along with bowel rest, can help relieve symptoms. The reason your wife is concerned about your levels of vitamin B12 is that Crohn's disease can cause the tissue of the bowel to thicken, become scarred, or develop ulcers. Any of these may cause the bowel to lose the ability to properly absorb nutrients. When the disease is located at the far end of the small intestine, where vitamin B12 absorption takes place, maintaining healthy levels of that vitamin can indeed become an issue. We need about 2.4 micrograms of B12 per day for our bodies to carry out functions like making red blood cells, keeping our nerves healthy, and making DNA. Sources of B12 include fish, meat, poultry, eggs, milk, and other dairy products, with liver and clams delivering a particularly heavy dose of the vitamin. It's also added to some breakfast cereals and is available as a supplement. Although most people in the United States get enough B12 through a balanced diet, up to 15% of Americans have some degree of deficiency. Some older adults lack adequate hydrochloric acid in their stomachs to properly separate B12 from food. That means that when the contents of the stomach reaches the end of the small intestine, B12 is not available in a form that can be absorbed. In individuals like yourself whose bowel is chronically inflamed, absorption in the small intestine can become compromised, even with proper digestion in the stomach. Symptoms can indicate a vitamin B12 deficiency include feeling weak and tired for no apparent reason, mental confusion or fogginess, a decline in balance, the onset of depression, and even signs of dementia. Other indicators may be poor appetite, unexplained weight loss, ongoing constipation, and nerve problems like prickling or tingling in the hands or feet. In extreme cases, a deficiency of vitamin B12 can lead to megaloblastic anemia, which can cause extreme fatigue, dizziness, and pale skin. If these symptoms sound familiar, your family doctor will measure your B12 levels via a simple blood or urine test. Should a deficiency be found, treatment may include a diet of foods rich in B12, regular B12 supplements, or in a severe case, B12 injections. And considering that long-term B12 deficiency can cause nerve damage and other serious problems, we would also prescribe a thank you to your wife. Now you can send your questions to Ask the Doctors at mednet.ucla.edu. Jeff?
Thanks, Don. From the World Herald, by the time scans showed that his B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma was coming back last fall, James Olson had run through many of his treatment options. In early January, his doctor recommended that the Kansas City, Missouri man travel to the Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha to see whether he was a candidate for a new type of therapy still in clinical trials. In May, Olson, 69, received an infusion of his own immune cells, which had been removed from his body and modified to recognize and attack the cancer. Known as CAR-T, or chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, it represents a new way of targeting some cancers beyond that of traditional treatments. About 10 weeks later, his scans are good, and he's got the stamina to mow his lawn and do some house painting. He's enjoying the little pleasures of life, even seasonal chores like installing a window air conditioner unit at his home. His doctors at the medical center, meanwhile, say they hope they'll soon be able to offer CAR-T to more patients. The trial that Olson participated in is still underway, and the medical center continues to accept new patients. Another version of the treatment has shown so much promise that it's been fast-tracked by the Food and Drug Administration and could receive conditional approval late this fall. The medical center is set to participate in an expanded trial for that treatment, possibly as soon as this month. Recently, an expert panel unanimously endorsed a version of CAR-T for children and young adults with recurring acute lymphoblastic leukemia. If the FDA clears the drug, medical center doctors hope to offer the treatment to young adults up to age 25. They'd also like to see new trials with that drug or others for older adults with recurring ALL, as the leukemia is known. These people need something else, and this may be it, said Dr. Matthew Lunning, a hematologist and oncologist with Nebraska Medicine. The federal panel's endorsement came at a time when a number of companies are racing to develop therapies based on the approach, which scientists first began to explore decades ago. If approved by the FDA, the Novartis product endorsed by the panel would become the first gene therapy approved in the United States. In addition to targeting relapsed lymphoma and leukemia, researchers also are beginning to study the therapy for solid tumors, the kind that start in organs or tissue. Leukemia and lymphoma are considered blood cancers. Dr. Julie Vos, Chief of Hematology and Oncology at Nebraska Medicine, said the therapy offers many bright spots in oncology. We just have to learn how to use it in each specific disease and in each specific patient, she said, noting that the therapy is not a one-size-fits-all treatment, as existing methods have been. We have to personalize that treatment. But even with FDA approval, she said the treatment's potential side effects, which include fever and flu-like symptoms ranging from mild to extremely severe, mean it can only be done at specialized centers like the medical center. Indeed, one earlier trial was closed because some patients suffered severe complications. Vos said trials in non-Hodgkin lymphoma all have produced good results, including the trial currently underway at the medical center and 8 other sites nationwide. Nationally, patients involved in the trial have had a complete remission rate of 60% after 30 days and 40% after 60 days. Officially, the condition is known as refractory diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma, an aggressive disease that is among approximately 80 subtypes of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. These were patients who had failed every other possible treatment, Vos said, and more than half had good response to the treatment. Treatment for newly diagnosed non-Hodgkin lymphoma and acute lymphoblastic leukemia usually begins with chemotherapy. About 30% of non-Hodgkin lymphoma patients and roughly 40% of acute lymphoblastic leukemia patients relapse after chemo. The majority of those go on to have a blood or bone marrow transplant, from which about half will relapse. Patients who relapse after the transplant, or those who aren't candidates for a transplant, could be potential candidates for CAR T therapy. Unlike traditional gene therapy, however, CAR T doesn't involve replacing disease-causing genes with healthy ones. Instead, technology is used to reprogram T cells, immune cells that normally help the body fight infection and cancer. In lymphoma patients, however, Vos said T cells go haywire and don't properly fight cancer. During treatment, the patient's T cells are collected during an outpatient procedure and sent to a lab in California for processing. The patient then receives several days of intense chemotherapy. The modified T cells are returned to Omaha and put back into the patient, who is monitored at the hospital for 7 to 10 days. The entire process takes about 3 weeks. Olson, who drove to Omaha last week for a checkup, said he didn't really have any side effects from the procedure. I wondered if they'd given me a placebo, said Olson, who spent his working life in real estate and was diagnosed in 2010. He was well aware of the possible risks after reading and signing a 33-page consent form. The next question, for patients and researchers alike, is how long the treatment will hold. We don't know how long because this is such a new treatment, Vos said, but many of the patients who have been treated over the past year are doing well. That question, like many in cancer treatment, comes with its own risks and benefits to balance. If half of the lymphoma is gone and it lasts years, Lunning said, that's better than a remission that lasts a month.
Thanks, Deb. Well, let's find what advice Amy Dickinson has for us today. Dear Amy, my wife and I have a 5-year-old son who has vision and hearing disabilities, but is very social. He doesn't always pick up on social cues, but is always interested in meeting new friends, and his mom and I encourage this. However, occasionally, we run into children at the park, museum, etc. that are less than kind. Most often, these kids don't have an adult supervising them, or if they do, they're drinking wine at a picnic table 100 yards away. I'm wondering what the proper response is for a child that isn't mine, who's going up the slide backward while other kids are coming down, or throwing bark in the face of a child who has already requested that he stop. I've tried your usual balanced, patient tone, but typically it leads to more aggression. Signed, Priority Parent. Dear parent, you supervise your son closely, and given his challenges, this is important. Younger children will often try to push boundaries on the playground, and this is one vital function of play. But a child also needs to learn to respect basic safety rules. If a child is climbing up the slide while others are coming down and you don't see an adult nearby, you should say, "Hi there. You shouldn't climb backward up the slide because the other kids are trying to slide down. Use the stairs, okay?" If the child hears you, considers his options, and continues the behavior, you should ask, "Do you have a grown-up with you?" Find out where the adult is and ask the adult, "Could you move closer to the slide? I think your child needs some closer supervision." Understand that that child, like yours, may have special challenges. If a child is throwing bark at another child and no other adult is present, you should say, "You know you don't throw bark. You need to find a different way to play." Many parents are tolerant of having others step in with respectful corrections, but if a parent responds with aggression, you should back away, and you should never touch another child unless you are saving him from harm. Dear Amy, my boyfriend and I have a great relationship. From the get-go, we have open communication, and my girlfriends have advised me to make your own relationship rules. This leads into some age-old issues. He pays for most of our dates, but sometimes I take him out. I feel that it is only fair for me to show him my appreciation. I also open my own car door and sometimes hold the door for him when walking into a building. I find nothing wrong with any of this. My parents feel that he should be opening all car and building doors for me, as well as paying for any and all meals and activities. They say this shows that he wants to take care of me and that he puts me first. They say I should expect this of him. I feel that how we handle paying our dates is our choice. What is wrong with holding my own door or holding the door for him? We are equals in this relationship. It surprises me that my parents are so adamant about this. My mom has raised her daughters to be strong and independent, but now she is expecting me to be meek and to expect a man to take care of trivial tasks. We will be adhering to these rules when around my parents in order to not make waves. Do you think this is the right thing to do? Signed, Happy. Dear Happy, no. I think your parents letting you adhere to your own relationship rules is the right thing for them to do. You don't say how old you are or why you are sharing details about your dating life with your folks, but I suggest that you run your healthy relationship however you want to. You could discourage your parents' comments by learning how to draw some boundaries and by assuring them only of your happiness. Tell them, "Mom, Dad, I've got this." Dear Amy, I agreed with your response to worried future mom concerning her in-laws' desire to have their aggressive dogs around a newborn. This is a preventable hazard. However, you could have suggested Skype calls as a safe way to keep in touch without the danger of the dogs. Signed, Newsday Reader. Well, dear reader, great suggestion. Thank you very much. Now you can contact Amy Dickinson via email, askamy@amydickinson.com. Deb?
Thanks, Don. Some things are happening around Omaha in the entertainment world, this weekend. The Durham Museum is offering free root beer floats this weekend. On Saturday, each museum visitor will receive a ticket for one 8-ounce root beer float with the price of admission in celebration of National Root Beer Float Day. Soda jerks, working the museum's authentic soda fountain, make floats the old-fashioned way, adding root beer flavoring and seltzer water to hand-scooped ice cream. The museum, 801 South 10th Street, is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday. Admission is $11 for adults, $8 for seniors, $7 for children 3 to 12, and free for children ages 2 and under. Also happening this weekend, Omaha World Herald cartoonist Jeff Koturba will present an unusual two-day art show at Gallery 72, 1806 Vinton Street. In addition to displaying his editorial cartoons and watercolors, he will draw personalized pieces for show patrons. An opening reception is set for August 11th, though that's not this weekend, from 5 p.m. to 9. The show will continue from 1 to 4 on August 12th. At the show, he will create a drawing on nearly any subject while you wait. Think thank you cards, birthday greetings, or a watercolor caricature. Koturba has won several awards for his cartoons and has written two books, Drawing You In and Inkings. His cartoons are syndicated to more than 850 newspapers worldwide. And finally, the Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts will highlight Nebraska's agricultural heritage with an event this weekend. Nebraska Farm and Family Day will be from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday at the Bemis, 724 South 12th Street. Admission is free. The event will explore how agriculture has shaped the state's culture as Nebraska celebrates its 150th year of statehood. Visitors can view an art installation, David Brooks' Continuous Service Altered Daily, which features every piece of a dismantled 1976 John Deere 3300 combine harvester. There will also be an 11 a.m. panel discussion with the Bemis exhibitions manager and Sarpy County farmers about the impact agriculture has had on contemporary state history. The event will include a free grilled hot dog lunch, family activities, and agriculture displays.
Thanks, Deb. Well, it's time to move on to business and markets. And what's coming up this weekend is tax holiday. And that's Iowa and Missouri. Of course, Nebraska, we don't do that. From Sioux City, Iowa, a major Iowa shopping holiday is fast approaching. During Iowa's annual sales tax holiday, that's August 4th and 5th, most apparel priced less than $100 will be exempt from state and local sales taxes. Western Iowa retailers happen to be in a good location for a tax-free holiday, as shoppers will come from neighboring South Dakota and Nebraska for the event. At least 16 states have back-to-school shopping holidays planned this year. Missouri's sales tax holiday, August 4th through 6th. Exempt sales tax from larger purchases, including personal computers, up to $1,500. Mode, a boutique at Lakeport Commons Outdoor Mall in Sioux City, estimates it might have 4 times as many customers as usual during the sales tax-free weekend. Store manager Christy McGregor said the store carries a range of styles and sizes, so mothers and grandmothers can bring school-age girls there for back-to-school shopping, and everyone can walk out with something. Kim Kletschke, co-owner of Carlton's men's clothing store in downtown Sioux City, said that the extra foot traffic of the tax holiday is a bonus for his store during the summer season, when all people want to be in is a t-shirt and swimsuit instead of dress clothing. It's a good incentive to get them out and thinking about buying fall clothes maybe sooner than they would need them, Kletschke said. Just in general, it might be just enough of an extra incentive to go through the sales racks. Even though most tax holiday shoppers are in back-to-school frame of mind, Kletschke said his customers still take advantage of the tax break. Now, here's some a list of what's exempt and what isn't. Non-exempt. Not exempt. In other words, you pay taxes on athletic clothing, including gloves, pads, helmets, skates, shoes, and uniforms. What's exempt? Baby bibs. You don't pay taxes on those. Clothing and diapers, swimsuits, coats, jackets, furs, employee uniform, pajamas, wedding apparel. Iowa's rules regarding what is and isn't exempted from state and local sales tax during the holiday can be confusing. For example, while handkerchiefs are taxed, bandanas aren't. Baby receiving blankets are exempt, while ordinary blankets aren't. So, if you have some special needs, clothing that is, head over to Iowa and take advantage. Deb?
Thanks. Here's a business brief from the World Herald. Wells Fargo and Company customers accused the bank in a lawsuit of forcing them to pay for unnecessary auto insurance that drove some of them so far into a financial spiral that their vehicles were repossessed. The complaint comes after a year of hand-wringing and internal changes brought on by earlier wrongdoing at Wells Fargo. Bank workers opened up possibly 2.1 million checking and credit card accounts without customers' permission over about half a decade, and the bank paid $185 million to regulators to settle. Now the bank is accused of bilking millions of dollars from unsuspecting customers who were forced to pay for auto insurance they did not need or want, pushing almost 250,000 of them into delinquency and resulting in almost 25,000 vehicle repossessions, according to a proposed class action lawsuit filed Sunday in San Francisco federal court. And another business story, Charter, one of the largest cable companies in the United States, said it is not interested in buying wireless carrier Sprint. Sprint, the fourth largest carrier in the U.S., is unprofitable and has a lot of debt. According to published reports, Sprint had proposed an acquisition by Charter. Sprint didn't answer a request for comment Monday.
Okay, 46 minutes after the hour, time for sports. Here's some good news. Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook has been chosen to go into the American Volleyball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. I'm surprised he isn't already there. He'll be honored during a ceremony in Kansas City, Missouri in December during the group's convention and the NCAA Final Four. The AVCA announced Monday that the 15th class of inductees will be Debbie Brown, former USC national champion and coach, Cecile Reynaud, former Florida State coach, Roseanne Wugridge, current Cal Poly Pomona coach, and Cook. Those four will make a total of 77 members in the Hall of Fame. It's a great honor to be part of the 2017 AVCA Hall of Fame class, Cook said in a prepared statement. While it is nice to be recognized by the AVCA, the true rewards of the coaching profession are the relationships I've developed over the years with my coaches, staff, and I'll find it here. Oh, it's somewhere. And the student athletes and the growth of the game of volleyball overall. I think this honor is a reflection of the program we've built here at Nebraska, and that is a credit to the whole athletic department and all of my coaches and players who have helped elevate this program throughout the years. Next week, Cook will begin his 18th season as Nebraska head coach. He helped the Huskers win national championships in 2000, 2006, and 2015, and has won 11 conference titles. He's coached 49 AVCA All-Americans and was the AVCA Division I National Coach of the Year in 2000 and 2005. His record at Nebraska is 484 wins and only 64 losses, and the Huskers have reached the NCAA Final Four 7 times with Cook as head coach. Cook was previously the head coach at Wisconsin, where in 7 years he had 161 wins and 73 loss record and made the NCAA tournament 5 times in 7 seasons. Since taking over at Nebraska, Cook has worked to promote the sport on both a local and national level. Since moving to the Devaney Sports Center in 2013, Nebraska has led the NCAA in attendance, averaging 8,210 fans per match last season. What sets John apart from other exceptional coaches is the effort he made in trying to make women's volleyball a premier collegiate sport, said Terry Pettit, the previous head coach at Nebraska and AAVCA Hall of Fame member, in a news release. He has done this by promoting the sport on television, leading the country in attendance, by hosting regional and national NCAA events, by encouraging his peers to do everything possible to create an atmosphere that showcases women's volleyball, and by leading one of the very few women's programs in any sport to produce a net profit.
Thanks.
Always important, I guess.
Yeah. From Lincoln, play for Sam Foltz and win games while doing so. Really, that's how simple Drew Brown wants the next 5 months to be. But there are plenty of other football details that could distract the Nebraska senior kicker. Already the school's 7th leading career scorer, 282 points. He has an outside shot this fall at catching Alex Henry, 397, for number 1 all time. He's among 30 players named to the watch list for the new Groza Award given annually to the nation's best kicker. Mechanics, leadership, figuring out exactly who will be his position coach. It could be new safeties coach Scott Booker, but Brown isn't sure yet. All are means to the grander end of honoring Foltz, the star punter who also served as Brown's holder for 2 seasons before Foltz's death in a car accident a year ago. For me, it's like Sam never got to play his senior season, Brown said. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. And there's a lot of different motivations and different things that I can lean on for this season, but that's for sure going to be top priority. Every single kick I have, he wasn't able to have. I think that's a great motivator, not only for me, but for everyone on the team as well. And it's something I take a lot of pride in, and I'm excited to play out the senior season for him. The evidence suggests a successful tribute is coming. Brown made 12 of 14 field goals last year and all 38 extra point tries. Of 62 career field goal attempts at NU, the South Lake, Texas native has made 47, 75.8%. His kickoffs, 189 of them in 3 seasons, including 76 touchbacks, are the kind his defense loves. Brown also brings longevity, having played in all 39 of Nebraska's games the last 3 years. Only defensive backs Joshua Kalu and Kyron Williams can match that feat. It all adds up to a resume that supports Brown when he says his small class of fellow seniors, 20 are listed on the team website, plans to make a big difference. We take it personally, Brown said. We don't want to end our season on a bad note just because we don't have a lot of seniors, just because we don't have a lot of experience. We want to be able to be those leaders on the team that have been through coaching changes. We have been through different changes, as many as you can possibly think of. We need to be the leaders of the team for sure. Jordan Ober will again serve as long snapper, and fellow junior Zach Darlington is set to reprise his role as holder, giving Brown some familiarity when the pressure moments come. That's big. Brown said before Fan Day on Saturday he thought most Husker fans wouldn't even know who NU's long snapper is because of how sound he's been. Should Brown need any advice, he knows his NFL veteran brother Chris is only a phone call away. The elder Brown was a 2-time All-America kicker for Nebraska in the 90s and sits at number 2 on the program's career scoring list with 388. He likes to know what's going on, and he likes to kind of get in my head a little bit, Drew Brown said, adding that the two aren't competitive about NU records. But I think he just lets me kind of do what I feel like I need to do. He tries to stay out of it as much as he can. If I would ever need any help, I would go and ask him. Still, this season comes back to Foltz, and Brown knows the former punter, his friend, would want Nebraska to be winning football games. I owe it to my team to be able to do the best I possibly can in every single situation I can be in, Brown said. As far as I know, I think I've played in the most games of anyone returning. I feel like I can add that experience to whatever any of the guys need.
Thanks, Deb. Well, Los Angeles reached an agreement Monday with international Olympic leaders that will open the way for the city to host the 2028 Summer Games while seeding the 2024 Games to rival Paris, officials announced Monday. The deal would make LA a 3-time Olympic city after hosting the 1932 and 1984 Games. With the agreement, the city is taking a major step toward bringing the games back to our city for the first time in a generation, Mayor Eric Garcetti said in a statement. He called it a historic day for Los Angeles, for the United States, and the Olympic movement. The agreement follows a vote earlier this month by the International Olympic Committee to seek an unusual deal to award the 2024 and 2028 games simultaneously. Paris is the only city left to host the 2024 games. The Los Angeles City Council and U.S. Olympic Committee Board of Directors will consider the agreement for approval in August. If approved, the IOC, LA, and Paris may enter a three-part agreement clearing the way for the IOC to simultaneously award the 2024 games to Paris and the 2028 games to LA. The IOC vote is scheduled for September in Lima, Peru. In a statement, the Paris Bid Committee welcomed the announcement in Los Angeles, but stopped short of confirming the obvious, that Paris is in line for the 2024 games. Paris 2024 is proud to be working together with the IOC and our friends in Los Angeles to reach a positive solution for both cities, the games, and the whole Olympic movement for 2024 and 2028, committee co-chair Tony Estanguet said. In embracing what amounted to the second place prize and an 11-year wait, LA will receive a financial sweetener. Under the terms of the deal, the IOC will advance funds to the Los Angeles Organizing Committee to recognize the extended planning period and to increase youth sports programs leading up to the games. The IOC contribution could exceed $2 billion, according to LA officials. That figure takes into account the estimated value of existing sponsor agreements that would be renewed, as well as potential new marketing deals. The delay to 2028 opens a host of questions for Los Angeles, which is looking at the prospect of retooling its multi-billion-dollar plans for more than a decade into the future. It would face challenges from maintaining public interest to recasting deals for stadiums, arenas, and housing that have been in the works for months and even years. LA and Paris were the last two bids remaining after a tumultuous process that exposed the unwillingness of cities to bear the financial burden of hosting an event that has become synonymous with cost overruns. LA was not even the first American entrant into the contest. Boston withdrew 2 years ago as public support for its bid collapsed over concerns about use of taxpayer cash. The U.S. bid switched from the East to the West Coast as LA entered the race.
Thanks. Here's a baseball note from the World Herald and from Alliance, Nebraska. The Manelli Mechanical Pride, really the Omaha Roncalli, defeated Wahoo State Bank 10-0 on Monday night to remain undefeated at the American Legion Class B State Baseball Tournament. Manelli, 29-15, pounded out 13 hits and broke the game open with a 5-run second inning. The game ended after 5 innings because of the 10-run mercy rule. Tommy Alitz had 4 RBIs for Manelli, including a first-inning sacrifice fly that put the Pride ahead to stay. Max Anderson picked up the victory, pitching 5 shutout innings. He allowed 4 hits and struck out 2. The team from Roncalli will play Gehring at 7 p.m. Tuesday. Wahoo and Nebraska City will play in an elimination game at 4 p.m.
Well, the opponents are set. The Nebraska men's basketball team announced Monday its Big Ten Conference foes for the 2017-18 season. Coming to Pinnacle Bank Arena will be Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. Nebraska will play at Illinois, Michigan State, Minnesota, Northwestern, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. Nebraska will play Illinois, Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, and Wisconsin twice. What isn't known yet are the dates. Days, times, and TV for conference games will be announced at a later date. Nebraska is scheduled to play 2 conference games in early December after the Big Ten moved its basketball tournament up in the calendar year. The league schedule appears to be a favorable one for NU, and with 3 of NU's home opponents, Illinois, Penn State, and Rutgers, all finishing in the bottom 6 of the conference standings last season. The announcement brings Nebraska's schedule one step closer to completion. There remain a handful of non-conference games yet to be announced.
Thanks. Here are a couple of short notes from Chattel's column. Osborne, who's giving up his skybox, among other things, is set to help his old quarterback, Scott Frost, raise some money for the University of Central Florida at 2 events this month. On August 17th, there's a dinner featuring Osborne and Frost, where tickets are $150, table of 10 for $1,500, and 2 VIP tables seating 8 people with Frost and Osborne for $2,500. The next day, Osborne will be the featured speaker at a UCF luncheon, where tickets are $114 each, and corporate tables are $800. And another short, Jordan Westerkamp signed with the Miami Dolphins, and while there's a long way to go for the former Husker, I still believe they'll make a fantastic NFL receiver. I hope he can at least stick with a practice squad in 2017 to show the knee is healed and show what he can do.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it is 12 o'clock, top of the hour. That means our time is up. So for Don Van
And Deb A.
So long, everyone. Have a great week.
And thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Don Van Morlingham. Thank you, Deb Haiti, for coming in today and spending your time with us so that we could be kept informed by your reading of the Omaha World Herald.